All right, I'd like to call our meeting to order. Roll call. All members of council are present. We did not have a closed meeting this evening to report. And I'd ask everyone to, in particular, for a moment of silence, keep in mind it's already been 1 year since the invasion of Ukraine. And we've seen the devastation that Ukrainians have faced in the last 12 months and so forth. So we got to continue to support our Ukrainian friends in particular. So keep them in your thoughts while we take a moment of silence.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From
We acknowledge that we are in the land and surrounded by water originally inhabited by the indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the wampum treaties, agreements between the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee, Lenni, Lenape, and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ojibwe, Ottawa, Potawatomi, Huron-Wendat peoples, and the Caldwell First Nation. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving towards a respectfully with all our First Nations and Inuit and Métis. To the members, any disclosure of pecuniary interest on the agenda is presented to you this evening.
Sorry, through Mr. Mayor. Under bylaw, I will not be voting as it pertains to lands associated to my family.
Okay, thank you. We'll have that duly noted. Members, we're moving on to the minutes of the regular council meeting of February 14th, the public council meeting February 14th, the Gouin Drain, public council meeting of February 14th, 2023, DeMonte Branch Drain, special council meeting February 14th on the Shoreline Master Plan, and a special council meeting February 13th on the strategic priority. Can I motion on those minutes? Deputy Mayor Bichetti moves. Councilor Houston support. Any errors or omission on those minutes as presented? Having heard none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you. We do have supplementary item added to the regular meeting this evening. Moved by Councilor Houston and Councilor Tonio. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Move on to delegations, members of council, and with us we have our corporate records and information management service review. With us this evening virtually is Emerge Consulting, Paula Letterman. We'll bring the report forward. We'll get this mic thing settled once and for all. If I could have the report, if we could bring it forward, and it's the LCS 2023-03 Corporate Records Information Management Review be brought forward on the agenda for discussion and consideration. Moved by Councilor Tonio, Councilor Dorner, support. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And now, without further ado, we'll have, would you like to, Mr. Auger, just to introduce our guests and present the report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I would like to welcome Paula Lederman, who's a partner with iMerge Consulting. iMerge Consulting has been providing records and information management advisory services for well over 20 years. Paula is a records manager, librarian, systems analysis, and consultant with extensive records management and technical background experience, together with her double master's degree. As lead records management consultant, Paula has undertook and been tasked with providing a review of the town's physical and electronic records to identify best strategies and best processes to optimize software platforms, integrate current applications, and digitize manual paper processes. And that's all for the goal of looking to improve both service delivery and efficiency. So Paula is here this evening to present her findings and recommendations from the review. Following tonight's presentation, administration will report back to council in due course with a framework for the implementation of recommendations from the review, including any budgetary impacts. Paula will provide a presentation for council in a moment, but the report before you this evening is seeking the following resolution. That report LCS 2023-03 entitled Corporate Records and Information Management Review, together with the presentation, be received. That the independent third-party review final report be endorsed in principle. That administration report back to council with its recommendations and implementation framework arising from that corporate records and information management review. And lastly, that the independent third-party review final report, again, is prepared by iMerge Consulting, be posted to the Town of Tecumseh website in accordance with the prescribed requirements of the funding received from the Municipal Modernization Program Intake 3. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Now, without further ado, our iMerge Consulting, Paula Lederman, please.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I have a bit of a raspy throat today, but I'll do my best to get through this. Before I get started, I did want to thank members of the Tecumseh staff, including Mark, Sean, Christina, and Jennifer, who worked as a steering committee with me to help in the data gathering and to provide feedback on the reports. And also to thank all of the staff who participated in the interviews early on in the process. Everyone was very cooperative, and it really made doing the work remotely much easier and complete. Next slide. So I wanted to talk in the brief time we have about the current state. What are you doing now in regards to managing your information, both paper and electronic, where the documents live, what the repositories, and that's specifically the electronic records, and a 3-year plan for the steps that need to be done in sort of a sequential order so as not to be overwhelming and confusing, and the costs and benefits of proceeding with the plan. Next slide. The scope of information governance covers a lot of kinds of information. And specifically that includes email, SharePoint backup, social media, network servers, and any other forms of electronic information. Next slide. The project schedule consisted of two major deliverables: the current state assessment, which looked at current practices. We compared what Tecumseh is doing to industry best practices, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And we did a survey of similar municipalities, both, excuse me, both in the county. I've got to take a sip of water. Both in the county, and there was one or two outside of the county, to establish some comparisons and municipal norms. And then from that, we produced a report that's a detailed current state assessment, and included in that are tools that we use to measure the practices by industry standard best practices and provide you with a benchmark as a starting point and a guide that you could repeat that analysis on an annual basis to provide a metric to track your progress moving forward on an information management plan. And then the final report really looked at the recommendations for moving forward with improved information management and governance, and the rationale, costs, and benefits of doing so. And finally, the last report included a 3-year plan, step by step, to accomplish the basic foundational elements that you need moving forward. Next slide. If we look at the where the records are, approximately 100,000 records are under control through Laserfiche, which is a system that's been in use for at least 15 years in the town. 100,000 records is a good number, but it's not good enough because what you'll see in the next slide, the number of actual documents that staff are keeping and managing is much higher. And another issue is the fact that the documents that are there are fragmented across 4 different iterations of the software, which represent different methodologies that were used to load or move records into the repository over time. So when we get into implementation, I'm going to talk a little bit about amalgamating the records and consolidating them so that they're all in a consistent form with consistent access and consistent coding. Next slide. If you look at the total of other repositories in the system, you'll see that there's a lot on network drives in the millions, and a lot in email, some in specific software, some in eScribe, for example. They're distributed all over for a total of an estimated 6 million records, but not all of those records are ones that need to be managed. Some might be transitory records, meaning they're not that significant in terms of responding yes or no, and they don't contain significant contents that reflects business decisions. So even if we take 20%, there's still 1.2 million records out there on network drives and in emails, in other software that should be managed as records. Next slide. So we did a strengths, opportunities, and threats assessment. And the strengths and opportunities is the fact that, number one, there's a lot of enthusiasm from staff to use managed records. For the records that are in there and put in there properly, they are easy to use, that staff can rely on them as being authentic, and they are controlled. For many years, the town of Tecumseh and many other towns in Ontario are using something called TOMRIMS, which is the Ontario Municipal Records Management System, which is a subscription to a framework that outlines how to organize records by assigning codes to each type of records: admin records, human resource records, finance records, and so on. So it takes the onus off the town to manage that themselves. And it includes the regulations and legislation that state how long you need to keep those records. And a key principle of good records management is what we call life cycle management, meaning that when a record is created and saved and preserved, just like a library book coming into a library, it's controlled and indexed in a way that makes it findable. And that happens as early as possible in the life cycle, not at the time you're disposing of the record. So that is one of the strengths, and that many departments are applying the codes that are in TOMRIMS, we call it for short, to the indexing of the documents they're creating. And so there's an ability to tie everything into the information management strategy. Next slide. In terms of weaknesses, there's a few manageable problems, but ones that do need attention to be compliant with those rules of how records are held, how long they're kept, what records have personal information, and so on. So as I pointed out earlier, the different repositories is problematic because finding something might require searching in multiple places and not knowing which is the most up-to-date or authentic. There's the whole issue of integrating the records retention, which is the rules of how long you need to keep records, and disposal. So while on the paper records, you're doing a fairly good job of disposing records when they meet the retention date, very little, if any, disposition is happening on the electronic records. They're just accumulating over time. So over 15 years, I don't think there have been any electronic disposals. Part of that is staff training, and part of that is the fact that some of the functions that support disposal of the electronic records have not been turned on or initiated. So there are resources that are required to support the migration of the content, to consolidate it. And another issue is looking at the content and dealing with a more manageable AODA solution, which was outside the scope of the project, but is still relevant because especially for the web content and stuff that's accessible to the public, it needs to be AODA compliant. So one of the questions that was posed at the beginning was, is Laserfiche, the tool that's currently being used, the right tool for the job? But the point is right now that the tool, there are enough people in the town, on the town staff that have familiarity, and the tool has some strong functionality to support what you need to do. And just changing the tool alone won't get you very far because of the need for consolidation and better indexing and better life cycle management. Next. So we went forward on the recommendations and the priorities of how to improve the current state. Next slide. And part of that had to do with automating the life cycle management of records in the existing repository, planning migration into the managed repository. So over time, department by department, you can start gaining control of the records, keeping them over the long term and preserving them over the long term. And then at the point where they're consolidated, transfer those possibly to the cloud or to another information and records management software tool. To do that, we've proposed 3 roles. One, a representative in each department that could be more involved with records management tasks within their department and be the touch point for training their own staff. Excuse me, and that's estimated at about 8 hours a month for each of those roles. And it's possible that one liaison could possibly cover 2 or more departments. There's also the role of the records coordinator, which is recommended as a full-time position under the role of a deputy clerk, to do work as a coordinator to start migrating the data, to work out the indexing, to keep the policies up to date, to help automate the disposition side of the equation. And finally, there's a recommendation for a technical analyst who works more on the IT side to generate reports to track the data that's being migrated and to ensure the integrity of the content and the system. And that is estimated to be a half-time position or possibly a contract position or a service agreement with a third party. Next slide. So the kinds of things that are listed in the implementation plan, which is fairly dense, not reading, exciting reading for sure, but really a step-by-step recipe to move you forward to better information management and control. And I won't read all of these bullet points, but that is what you're aiming to accomplish. Next. Applying the retention rules to box paper records, which is something easy to do, and some issues around security of the stored paper records, the implementation of retention and disposals. And then finally, the thing that if you are going to maintain electronic records for over 10 years, we always prescribe a plan for digital preservation, because from 20 years ago, records that were created under WordPerfect can't be easily read now and so on. So there are tools available that help preserve the records over time. Next slide. The technology to support content management includes, again, the life cycle and disposals within Laserfiche. And then at some point after consolidation, there will be an opportunity to, after the migration has happened, to look at alternative software platforms if Laserfiche is no longer doing the job, but at least you'll go into an alternative software with a clean repository. And included in that too are things like reviewing scanning initiatives. So as more and more documents get converted from paper into digital, you can start addressing things like a business process analysis so that things could flow rather than passing paper around, using electronic documents. Next. So to make all this happen, of course, there's a lot of things like training, communications, and change management all have to be done at the same time. And that's done to get buy-in from the staff, to make them feel that the repository is making their jobs easier to find, easier when there's staff turnover, and knowing a lot of the disposal functions and indexing functions are automated to some extent. And most important, they're consistent across all of the departments in the town. So it's not like each department sort of running their own little information business. And next slide. And it's really important to realize these functions, because if staff have one place to look and one that's well coordinated and managed, it makes their work easier. It makes rework easier. It's productive when there's turnover or retirements and so on, that information is held and findable, not hidden in personal emails or whatever. There's more accountability, protection of personal information. And the most important thing is there's a basis on which to improve customer service delivery, so that you can find things, they're accountable. And when you find records, you know they're authentic, and that they're the most current version of the record. So a lot of benefits that translate into improved productivity for staff and improved service. And generally what happens when we look back at clients who went through this process 10 or 15 years ago, they start using their combined information as an asset to the town. And so a lot of synergy occurs by the consistency of finding and naming things between departments. Next. The cost, and these are a combination of salary and vendor costs. So there's 1.5 positions we're proposing, and some third-party vendor costs come out over 3 years at just under $500,000. It's based on salary estimates that are general in the geographic area, and 10% added for benefits. What was the assumption we used in drawing up these figures? Next. this, I know you can't see, it's very small, but these are all of the steps over a 3-year period. Anywhere that's marked internal means that that task would be a function of the staff we've identified as requiring. And these are all, each line in here is detailed in the full report. Next, I guess in conclusion, the thing I want to emphasize is when you're looking at being compliant with the way your information is handled, which means managing it and finding it and disposing of it, going through that life cycle in a compliant way, then your information becomes an asset to the town. And the thing I wanted to emphasize is it's not a 3-year project. So it's not that you can get someone in a contractor for 3 years and poof, you're done. Because as you move forward, you'll have the capacity to do more business process automation in terms of making your services more effective, your staff more productive for things like approvals and less moving the paper around, less time searching for things, less time redoing work because you can't find the original. So it's an investment in the longer term picture. And what we see with organizations when they get into things like analytics and artificial intelligence and even some robotic operations, all of that is based on the knowledge base that you're going to create today and the years moving forward. And some of those are very effective. For example, auto classification, where you get an email and the system can read the email and determine the context and assign a tom rooms code and automatically move it into the repository, is one less thing your staff member has to do or worry about or process. So there's still human input, but now we're finding with, say, auto classification can accurately store and save emails about 95% of the time. And the other 5% of the time, of course, a human would intervene in the process and override the artificial intelligence to do that. So that's basically the big picture. The report is very detailed in terms of the principles for good record keeping practice and what they look like as you move forward. So it's color coded on a scale from red, which is non-existent, to blue, which is super duper. And Tecumseh scored as a baseline at the 2 level, 1 above the red, so it's orange. And really the implementation plan will move you over those years into the yellow and towards the green side of that equation. So you have a baseline and a plan to move through targets without it being disruptive or like overwhelming for your staff. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much for the report. And so I'll certainly look at council. Any questions or certainly comments, Deputy Mayor McKetty.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Paula. The question I have, it's in the report about the cost. Right now it says the EDRMS planning for the transition to a cloud-based. So is that the future that we're looking at, the cloud-based, this, $500,000 cost is just to get us to that? And then after that, there'll be more cost for the cloud-based, or is that kind of setting the foundation for a cloud-based?
My expectation is, oh, did you want me to answer?
Yes, so just a question in terms of the
Okay.
cost, so I get an idea what that 500,000.
Yeah, the cost is to get to that, and you're already paying a fee for the Laserfish product. So the transition in terms of software will replace that expense you're already covering right now. And the idea is that the work that needs to be done, more of the cleanup work to get ready, is just by moving to a cloud-based solution, even if the cost is higher or lower, you still have to deal with the problem because the records have to have integrity. You know, there's standards that if you're going to introduce electronic records in a court as evidence, it has to be reliable, and which means you have to prove the system is reliable and that the records are under protection. So there's like audit trails tied to every single record that's put in. So the consolidation, which is good that you've got a basis to start from and a lot of knowledge already in the town to do that. You know, you're partway there already. But just replacing the software now, either with a new software tool, or some towns look at SharePoint with an add-on software, or a cloud-based solution, won't get you too far.
Thank you. And I see, like I said, the 1.5 helps us get to that point with those positions.
Yes.
Thank you.
Just if I can, your worship, through you to the deputy mayor on the original question on the cost of going to the cloud. So as Paula alluded to in her presentation, we are currently and have been for 22 years clients of Laserfish, and it's a product we've invested a lot in over time. And as with many of our enterprise solutions now, they are migrating to the cloud. And during the 2023 budget deliberations, we did accommodate to make that migration. So the annual fee we pay now for the on-premise version of Laserfish is contemplated in the 2023 budget to go to the cloud. That's just the subscription fee. But again, as Paula mentioned, there are migration costs and get the cost to get our repositories in order prior to making that jump. But it is something we're looking at the county level in collaboration with the lower tiers, because we all share in that licensing agreement currently. But like I said, the writing's on the wall for many of our applications these days for better or for worse to migrate to the cloud. But it is something that is contemplated in this year's budget.
Any further questions, accounts? Go ahead, Councilor Houston.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I guess to our clerk and our delegation. Thanks for the report. Thanks for the information. I think there's a lot of efficiencies that that we have here on the table, and you know, a lot of great things that you know, will come out of the full implementation of the information that you've presented. I wanted to say, you know, thanks to our CAO and, you know, our team for putting, I guess, this project in front of us, utilizing the funds that the MMA have provided. I know we've had a couple different projects, the IT review and many others. I can't think of all of them that we've been able to use those dollars for. And I see, you know, the clerks and the IT, it's all going to kind of come together for us in the, I guess, the final piece of this. And I also see this as an efficient byproduct of what the pandemic has resulted, right? We're all looking at being more efficient. How can we do things better? How can we access information more? And it's kind of forced our hand to make these changes, I think, much quicker than any of us have thought before. But I just wanted to say thank you, because I think it will kind of leapfrog us, right, organizationally, to operate much more efficiently. So there's a lot of information here, right? And it'll take a while to kind of put it all into play, but I just wanted to say thank you.
Any further The only comment I would add is it's about obviously modernizing our, how we do business and so forth. I know our utilities have moved probably in the last 4 to 5 years to cloud-based because of the amount of data that they actually have to store. And the other piece too, and I think it's the security of the information that we have to hold. And there's no doubt that we have to continue to modernize. And because I can tell you on the dark side, we know what they're doing is they're improving their technology and their ability as we speak. And so I think that's the other piece as well, is that it's modernizing. It's and the amount of data that we're asked to collect now, and on behalf of our friends at Queen's Park and the other in Ottawa and all of the other information, it's also the safeguard and protection of our the information. So I think this is just that next evolution of modernizing and being more conscious in terms of protecting the integrity of the corporation. And so I think this is certainly a timely report. And if we recall too, we did receive some monies from to modernize and to find efficiencies. And this is kind of the result from it and so forth. So I want to echo what Councillor Houston, to staff is, for continuing to bring opportunities of modernizing our whole operation and finding those efficiencies. Further questions or comments on the report? I think at this stage, I think you've alluded to Mr. Clerk in terms of the recommendation. Like we can certainly go through it again, but it's just basically to receive the report and then and further that administration report back to council with its recommendations and implementation framework rising from the corporate records and information management review, and furthermore, that the independent third-party review final report entitled Corporate Records and Information Management Review, Information Management Strategy, February 2023, as prepared by Emerge Consulting, be posted to the town and Tecumseh's website in accordance with the requirements of the funding received from the Municipal Modernization Program. And I believe that's intake number 3. Moved by Councillor Houston, supported by Councillor Tonio. No further questions or comments. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. So with that, Paula, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And certainly thank you, Sean and administration for this great work. Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
Good evening. Communication for information. We have just one item. If I could have a motion to receive. Councillor Higginson, Councillor Tonio. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Communications action required. There's none. Committee minutes. We have the Court of Revision of February 14th, 2023, the Antaya Drain. A recommendation that Tuesday's February 14th minutes of the Court Revision Antaya Drain as duplicated and delivered to members be adopted as presented. Councillor Tonio and Councillor Dorner. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. The second report, committee minute, is Court of Revision as well, February 14th, 2023. That was the branch of the South Talbot and Holden outlet drain, the Mio Bridge. And also the recommendation that the Tuesday, February 14th, 2023 minutes of the Court of Revision of the branch, the South Talbot and Holden outlet drain, Mio Bridge, as was duplicated and delivered to the members, be adopted as presented. Councillor Houston, Councillor Jobin. Questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Move on to reports, our first reports from our financial services. That's the financial services 2023 02 2021 development charge reserve statement. Mr. Kitsos.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. This report is our annual report on the year-end status of our development charge reserve funds. So administration recommends that the 2021 DC Reserve Fund Statement be received and that it be made available to the public on the town's website, and further that it be forwarded upon request to the province. So legislation requires municipalities that incorporate development charges to provide an annual report to council with respect to the status of DC reserve funds. So this report represents our 2021 annual report. Typically, this report would be presented to council much sooner, usually by June 30th of the following year, as per our council motion. Overall, the town collected just over $3 million in DCs in 2021, which is significantly larger than what we typically collect. Our 5-year average for years 2016 through 2020 was about $950,000 per year. So the town has 8 DC reserve fund categories, and they're based on infrastructure type. And you'll see in our report that we note that DC reserve fund balances for categories that are not in a deficit position increased to just under 1.7 million from 1,059,000 in 2020. That's page 1 of the report. Sorry. Or sorry, page 2. Yep. Overall, our DC reserve funds in aggregate remain in a large deficit position. So DC reserve fund categories in deficit positions are presented in this table on page 2, in total of 13.6 million, which is down from a high of 16.2 million in 2019. So deficits occur when growth-related expenditures exceed our development charge collections in any year. The town did have a stretch of 10 years between 2010 through 2019, where the aggregate deficit increased each year, but that has now, we're starting to eat away at that. Deficits are funded through town reserves or reserve funds, and with the intention of repaying those reserves or reserve funds as DC revenues are received. If there are any questions, I can take those now.
Questions? Just a comment. That's why we need to get our development going. I think that's a good lesson there. And the other is our strength in our reserves to be able to continue to put a lot of dollars into our infrastructure. So so that's the good news part of it. But it's nice to see that the reports that are coming in particular tonight to show us to get us started so that we can continue to lower that deficit. All right, no further questions or comments, then the recommendation is to that the 2021 Development Charge Reserve Fund Statement prepared in accordance with the Development Charges Act of 1997, SO 1997, I'll get into, be received, and that the 2021 Development Charge Reserve Fund Statement be made available to the public on the town's website in accordance with the Development Charges Act 1997. And further, that the report be forwarded upon request to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing as per the Development Charges Act of 1997. On the motion, moved by Councillor Higginson, Deputy Mayor Bichetti, support. No further questions or comments. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. Number 2 has been dealt with. So we'll move on to Public Works Engineering Services, and that's our PWES 2023-016 annual and summary reports for the year 2022 Town of Tecumseh Water Distribution System. Mr. Bartnick.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good evening, Council.
before we get into these next few reports specifically related to water, I wanted to take the time to acknowledge and introduce Brad Dupy, our Manager of Water Services, who's here with us this evening, as well as Nicole Bradley, our DWQMS officer, and they're in attendance tonight. I also wanted to thank them and the Water Services staff for all of their dedication and hard work to provide the town with safe drinking water. So with respect to report number 16 in front of you today, the Safe Water Drinking Act prescribes stringent and mandatory requirements to monitor, test, and report on drinking water quality. It requires an annual report to be prepared for the preceding calendar year that identifies specific details regarding overall quality of the drinking water supplied and made available to the public by February 28th of each year. The town must also provide a summary report and present it to council by March 31st of each year. The report must demonstrate regular review of compliance with the requirements of the Safe Drinking Water Act and its regulations, and terms of conditions and approval documents. The Water Services Division provided consumers with reliable, safe drinking water, adhering to all regulatory requirements. We are pleased to announce that there were 0 non-compliance events to report in 2022. And in accordance with the Safe Drinking Water Act, we ask that the 2022 annual report and summary report will be made available on the town's website following council's acceptance of these reports. I can go through the recommendations now, Your Worship, that the first recommendation that the 2022 MECP, which is the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, annual report and summary report for the town of Tecumseh water distribution system for the year 2022, has prepared in accordance with the Safe Drinking Water Act, OREG 170/03, Section 11. Annual reports and Schedule 22 summary reports be adopted, and that annual report and that the annual report and summary report be made available for public viewing through the Town of Tecumseh website. Be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Any questions or comments? Just that I want to acknowledge as well, Mr. Dupuy and certainly Ms. Bradley, and thank you again. Those are the nice reports. You know, when you see 0, those are the ones you like to see. And then on behalf of all of us around the horseshoe, we certainly appreciate the hard work and dedication of your staff at certainly in the water division. So thank you for a wonderful, clean report. And so with that, if there are questions, go ahead, Councilor Houston, and then Councilor Jobin to follow.
Thank you, and through you to Phil and to Brad. I just wanted to say thank you for taking the initiative to survey all of the local municipalities, because when we did the water training, right, we all have to go through and we all have to do it. And it just makes a lot of sense to collaborate with our neighbors and put that session on as a joint offering for all the municipalities. So thank you for the forethought and stepping up and just doing that on behalf of all of our municipal partners.
Oh, Councilor Jobin.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, to Brad and your team. I too want to thank you. I personally don't have town treated water, so I do completely understand the great importance of it, and also how it reflects on a municipality and all the hard work that your team does. So I do appreciate that. And I do appreciate your patience with me when I do ask you yearly if we've received any grantual opportunities to expand our own water services to the rural community. So I appreciate you and your department 100%. Thank you.
All right, any further questions or comments? If not, on the motion and recommendation, moved by Councilor Higginson, Councilor Tonio, support, all in favor? Those if any, that is carried. Okay. Okay, B is a PESW, the water distribution system. We did both, didn't we?
No, this is different. This is 2022 inspection report.
Ah, okay. The inspection report. Go ahead, Mr. Bartnick.
Thank you, through you, your worship. The report before you does have a recommendation that the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks inspection report for the Tecumseh Water Distribution System dated February 6, 2023 be received. A summary of the report. So the ministry conducts annual inspections of municipal residential drinking water systems to ensure compliance under the Safe Drinking Water Act, as well as the MECP certificates of approval. The MECP carried out an inspection on the town's water distribution system between January 19th and January 27th earlier of this year. A copy of the inspection report is contained within attachment number 1 of the report. The town's municipal residential drinking water system achieved an inspection summary rating record of 100%. That is the highest that we could achieve. I'm also pleased to announce that there were 0 instances of non-compliance and no best practice recommendations noted, and the town's inspection risk rating was 0%. Again, the best outcome that we could have received. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now.
Once again, I like 100 and I like 0. Okay, on the recommendation, Councillor Tonio, Councillor Houston. I know for the questions or comments on in favor, opposed, that is carried. Thank you. And finally, too, on the water, it's the 23-018 Drinking Water Quality Management System Operational Plan.
Thank you, your worship. Since 2008, the town's DWQMS operational plan has been endorsed and committed to by Tecumseh Town Council. As legislatively required by the province, the Tecumseh Water Service is required to review, update, and maintain its DWQMS operational plan on an annual basis. Changes and updates can be triggered by staff suggestions, changes in administrative or work processes, internal or external audits, and comments and inspections from the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. Reviewing, updating, and maintaining the DWQMS operational plan is an important part of the continuous improvement process. In order for the owner to continue to show support of its drinking water system and DWQMS, it is required that endorsement and a commitment to the updated operational plan are provided. The updated operational plan is provided in attachment 2 to the administrative report, and updates to the plan were due in part to the following: legislative and regulatory changes, risk assessment review, audit and inspection reports, and management review committee recommendations. The recommendations contained within the report today is that the reports PWES 2023-18 Drinking Water Quality Management System Operational Plan be received, and that Tecumseh Town Council endorse and commit to the Town of Tecumseh Distribution System Drinking Water Quality Management System Operational Plan, revision date February 28th, 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bartnick. Any questions or comments on the report presented? Hearing none. Motion to receive. Councillor Jobin and Councillor Houston. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Well, it looks like you're on a roll, Mr. Bartnick, so we'll get you on D, which is the Public Works Environmental Services 2023-021 amendment to the 2023-2027 PWS Capital Works Plan, Tecumseh Hamlet, Northwest Water and Wastewater Infrastructure.
Thank you, your worship. So as council may recall, in May of 2022, there was a presentation of the PWES capital priorities from 2023 to 2031. That outlined projects that address strategic priorities of growth and economic development, as well as council approved mandates. One of the highest priorities identified was the advancement of development and growth in the Tecumseh Hamlet area. In June of 2022, Council approved the commencement of the detailed design for the Tecumseh Secondary Plan Area Northwest Water Wastewater Infrastructure Project. So this consists of trunk water and wastewater infrastructure that will help facilitate the development of the Hamlet Secondary Plan along the Banwell corridor between County Road 22 and the CP rail. This project, it's also important to note that this project was also contained within our 5-year capital works plan, the 2023 to 2027 capital works plan. More recently, and in preparation of the RFP, which is the request for proposals for engineering consulting services for this project, there was a number of issues that became apparent that warranted administration coming back to council, which included an updated scope, strategic phasing of the project, and obtaining full project funding. Christina, if you could slide to page 3. Oh, thank you. So the first one, the updated scope. So we did identify 2 separate areas where expanding the scope would find efficiencies in construction and position the development of the land south of CP rail in a better position. So the first scope change we are recommending is the extension of the trunk sanitary and the trunk water main approximately 200 meters south. So that would be through the CP rail and the Hydro 1 corridor. Due to the lengthy approvals, it is advantageous to undertake the works at this time, which will help development of the Tecumseh Hamlet areas south all the way down to County Road 42. The second scope change that we had identified was on intersection road itself. So we, upon reviewing the alignment of the future sanitary and future water main, it became apparent that it would have to be installed within the existing right-of-way, in the existing road pavement itself, and likely require a full road reconstruction. The length from the intersection road, on intersection road from the north-south trunk facilities to easterly towards L'Esperance Road. It's approximately 700 meters, with approximately 80% of that road would require to be fully restored after those services were installed. We have identified some storm sewer improvements that are required throughout that corridor, some of which being identified as part of the storm drainage master plan that was just recently completed a number of years ago. So we did identify that there would be some construction efficiencies with the installation of the storm sewers and the road reconstruction at this time, being the curb and gutter, proper lighting, sidewalks, pathway, and to be installed now or as part of the trunk sanitary and trunk water main project itself. The second issue that we identified, Christina, if you can change to page 4, please. Yep, thank you. Was strategic phasing of the project. So upon review and preparation of the RFP, we have identified kind of a 2-phased approach or 2-contract approach. The first contract would be the sanitary and water trunk facilities through the existing easement from County Road 22 to Intersection Road, as well as Intersection Road itself. We believe that the design can be completed by the end of this year, with a tender hopefully out by late this year and construction starting early in 2024. The second phase or the second contract would be from Intersection Road southerly, and that would be the installation of the sanitary and water in that phase. This will allow the town some time to obtain the necessary easement through the properties, as well as obtain the approvals from the CP rail and the Hydro 1 corridors. We anticipate design would be completed mid-2024 with construction hopefully by late 2024. Lastly, we identified project funding allocations. So it's important to obtain approval for full project funding at this time. This will allow for the tendering of the contract, or at least phase 1 by the fall of this year, and continued work being design, acquisition of easements, obtaining approvals for contract 2. The financial implications. So in January earlier this year, we did bring a report forward, PWES 2023-01, which was our 5-year capital works plan. Did identify a cost estimate just shy of 14 million. With the updated estimate and the increase in scope, that has raised the cost estimate or the budget from just under 14 million to 16.6 million, which is an increase of 2.66 million. If that concludes my presentation, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Oh, just a comment. I mean, this is, I think council's been waiting for a long time for this. So thank you. And I think this is, I think it's a real critical point for our municipality. And I know that it wasn't easy. I know, thank you for being patient with us at this end in particular. When you're dealing with other municipalities and you're dealing with other agencies and, from storm water retention and, and all and so forth, it's not an easy task if you're just doing it yourself. I fully understand, but I think the plan that you've laid out, I think is a great one. And I think in anticipation, the timing's very good too, because in conjunction with what's happening across the street. And in particular with the housing requirements that we need, not way in the future, right now. I mean, we see the demand that's certainly there. So for me personally, I'm really excited about getting this project, underway, and certainly to your department, Phil, and planning and everybody that was involved in this, where we finally now reached the moment. I think that we've always said we want to pull the trigger and get going. And so here we are, we're here, and extremely excited in putting the community now I think in an incredible position for a good solid plan growth. It's continuous or contiguous growth. It's not sprawling or in our communities, and making sure that the services required to sustain the development, it's there. So thank you for the for all the work that I know many hours that have come through there. I guess my question would be as well is that it's in line with obviously the Banwell corridor piece that's in the city. And as we continue, we develop that, obviously, I don't know what how warm the city is and so forth, but as we build in that area, it's always been stated that we wanted sidewalks and trails and all this other stuff. We know what we're doing south of CP, but that's going to come in a third phase or a third or fourth phase down the road. Is there a thinking of at least when intersection roads going to be done and so forth with trails and sidewalks? And I'm thinking about kids going to Vista Academy and so forth. The road network that's going to be built there, at least is there an internal trail system or that will be, because I don't want to be dependent on somebody else doing it. I think our responsibility is to make sure that we have a good safe passage, to schools and so forth.
Yep. Very good question, Your Worship. I know in terms of the Banwell Road corridor and the County Road 43 corridor, I know as part of those EAs, which identified the ultimate build out and the cross section, they did contemplate active transportation. They did contemplate connectivity with active transportation, whether it was bike lanes or pathways of that nature. I know Brian could probably speak to this better than I can, but as part of the planning processes currently undertaken for the Tecumseh Hamlet Secondary Plan, there is an emphasis on interconnectivity with active transportation trail networks, not only within the future right of ways, but through future parks, as well as stormwater management facilities as well. And I think we, even as part of that plan, we have identified other north-south connections over the CP rail that I think we're going to be exploring. So we're not just reliant on the Banwell 43 north-south corridor, as well as the L'Esperance Road north-south corridors. So definitely looking at all options and how to better connect the communities from north to south.
Thank you. Councillor Tonio.
Just a comment to you, Mr. Mayor. I like the idea too, growing up at intersection of Banwell for 50 years, it was always supposed to be developed. It never was, and now it's here, and it's good to see. I think our community needs the growth. The development charges that we'll get from it will help a lot. One thing too, I asked Mr. Hellman, I was in Arizona years and years ago, and there was a subdivision, and they designed it in a way that kids can walk to school with hardly ever walking across roadways or things like that. I don't know if we can, make this area something very unique that we can maybe plan something that they can get to Vista without crossing too many intersections as we make the roads and things like that. So something to consider as we move forward.
Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. Well, that's an interesting concept that we have seen before. Phil made reference to a active transportation network that's being developed for this planning district. I don't know if we'll get as close as never crossing a street, but there is emphasis placed on clearly defined areas for alternative means of mobility, whether it's and non-automotive, walking, rollerblading, biking, and so on. And we always are looking at ways to have people in areas where they aren't in conflict with vehicles, but it is very challenging. And to get to the point where there's no connection points, especially in a confined space that we're dealing with here, and the crossing points that we have to deal with, the existing infrastructure that's already in place, and our critical destinations, one being, I think the mayor mentioned the high school, elementary high school to the south. We know there may be another school possibly in our planning district. But we do make it a high emphasis to design active transportation facilities that do not have conflict points. But it's likely that there will be some, but it is one of our mandates to ensure that those are implemented, both, as Phil mentioned, on the new road infrastructure, new trail systems, and on the existing corridors that we have that will be improved.
Thank you. And that's all I'm asking, is just so we can consider. I assume that we would not be able to cross, get from A to B without crossing roads, but if we can do it the best way, design it way, you guys are the best that we have in the county. So I'm sure you guys will find something that works out for a community. So thank you.
Councillor Houston.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to Mr. Bartnick and also Mr. Hillman. I guess I've got a comment and then maybe two questions. So I'll echo the comments. I'm excited to see this, and I think the community is excited to see this and to see now, sort of light shining, on the area. From what I understand, the landowners and developers are also sort of behind this, right? And they're interested and they want to develop, which is exciting to hear. So as the report says, tender late this year and into 2024 from a timeline perspective is exciting for us. And it's been a long time coming, right? For us. I've got two questions. One maybe from a planning perspective now to Councillor Tonio's question. For the community, what are the next steps now for us to understand how it will all look, or will there be further meetings or public meetings to show what that area is going to look like, either the road network or housing, mixed housing? I'm just curious now what the possible next steps might be to kind of unveil what the hamlet is going to end up like.
Great question through you, Mr. Mayor. So there have been a number of open houses over the last number of months where various displays have been put out for public comment, both from landowners, developers, and the public at large. We're in the process of just finalizing a draft of the secondary plan, which is a document that will map out what's the policy basis upon which we're going to make decisions. What's the vision for the area, and what is the general concept plan? What is the mix of uses that is proposed, and ultimately will lead to what are land uses that are being identified for this area. We're hoping to, in April at some point, update council with some details regarding that and go to a more formalized opportunity for public input. We have reviewed this as recently as this morning with a key quadrant, the northern quadrant that Phil was just speaking about with the landowners. And we can confirm there is still a very strong desire to develop in the area. I think the feedback to date has been very positive with respect to the concepts that are being presented in terms of the mix of uses, the connection points, the road networks, active transportation networks, parks, locations, and so on. But there is an important opportunity for the public to continue to have the ability to interact with this process. And we anticipate after updating council in April that that will occur. And then we'll be back to council with some final recommendations. The complexity of this is some of the issues that are being dealt with tonight are very much, they're entwined with this, but they're dealing with the introduction of infrastructure and the timing of it. And then there's this other planning, servicing and review process that's going on that's happening at a contemporaneously, basically. So a lot of moving parts here, but hopefully that helps, and it will bring people into the process and to let them interact with it.
Thank you. And through you, my second question, more from a development charge in financing. Yeah, as I understand from the report, we are proposing to kind of internally finance this from our reserves. And here 2.6 million is the way we've updated it, but maybe to Tom, just about up and thank you to Mr. Hillman and Mr. Bartnick to provide a little context here that I've spoken to you before, but to Tom, in updating our DCs to make sure that they're current, we've just updated this 2.6 million. And I'm wondering, down the road, hopefully inflation falls to a lesser level than what we experienced. But I'm just curious, capturing these increases in the DCs and how this area will develop quickly out of the gate. And if we're going to spend 16 million, hopefully it's less than 16 million. But I'm just curious from the DCs that we collect out of the gate that we're kind of made whole or we're up to date as possible on the values and just making sure that the DCs are a correct amount when we're levying those that come in. So I'm just curious, how do we keep current with escalations in a period like this, or just ensuring that we're collecting as much of a proper amount than we should be when we have an area like this that goes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So Tom gave me permission. So I'll start and then I'll give him the chair. It's very warm. So this is, there's a simple answer to this. One is that the development charge bylaw through the act itself allows us to have inflationary clauses that are tied to the consumer price index. The intent of that is to automatically have the DC charge that's collected move up as inflation increases. So these projects, Phil's changing the timing a bit of the projects, but our background report for the DC bylaw, where we get our justification for the DC amounts, identifies these projects and it has a number associated with it. That was the number that was in effect in the day the bylaw was passed. How we keep up with the inflationary component is through annual increases to the DC bylaw. Keeping in mind, we just completed an update a few months ago, and the town is up for a full review. I think our bylaw expires September 24. So, but the important thing is we have an inflationary component built in annually, and that's really how the numbers try and keep us whole.
Any further questions or comments on the report? Then there is a recommendation that the report PWES 2023-21 amendment to the 2023-2027 PWS Capital Works Plan, the Tecumseh Secondary Plan Area Northwest Water Wastewater Infrastructure Project be received, and that the expenditures of the expanded scope and construction costs for the Tecumseh Secondary Plan Area Northwest Water Wastewater Infrastructure Project of $15,598,500, or a total project cost of $16,618,500, be authorized and funded from $3.885 million from the Water Main Reserve Fund, $6.8535 million from the Wastewater Sewer Reserve Fund, $3.510 million from the Road Life Cycle Reserve, and $1.35 million from the Storm Sewer Life Cycle Reserve. On the motion, moved by Councillor Higginson, supported by Councillor Dorner. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you. Mr. Bartnick, you're still on. Boy, you're spending a lot
I'm
of
on a
money.
roll. Okay, thank you, Your Worship. The report before you this evening, PWES 2023-22, the Tecumseh Secondary Plan Area Environmental Assessment and Functional Servicing Report. I'd like to give a brief summary of the report and then perhaps dive into the recommendations for you. So a little bit of background. So going all the way back to 2011, Dialogue, an urban design consultant, was retained to assist the development of the Tecumseh Hamlet Secondary Plan. In 2012, it was identified that a range of servicing issues needed to be addressed with the Tecumseh Hamlet Secondary Plan concurrent with the planning processes. Dillon Consultant was retained in 2012 to complete an environmental assessment and functional servicing report. In 2014, the Upper Little River Watershed Master Plan, which was being undertaken by the town and the city of Windsor, managed by IRCA, was delayed. And this resulted in the Tecumseh Hamlet EA environmental assessment and the functional servicing report being delayed as well. So there was a period of time there where there was no progress made in this area. The Hamlet Secondary Plan Area and the associated engineering studies were then recommenced in 2020 by both Dialogue and Dillon Consulting. Since that time, Dillon Consulting has staged their engineering work to align with and provide assistance to the ongoing planning study. These stages consist of the following. So stage one was a stormwater facility and road network servicing review. Stage two was a sanitary sewer analysis along the County Road 42 corridor. Stage three, the technical support for planning study, the Tecumseh Hamlet Secondary Plan and associated official plan amendment. And stage four, the groundwater and methane gas investigation. We're before you this evening to ask for approval and award for stage five, which is the environmental assessment and functional servicing report. So back in as part of our 2020-2024 5-year capital works project, we did have a total budget approved in the amount of $805,000. The current request for stage five for the environmental assessment and functional servicing report is in the amount of $482,800. And I would like to note that all 5 stages are within the allocated budget. The recommendations contained in the report before you is that Dillon Consulting Limited be retained for consulting services for the Tecumseh Hamlet Secondary Plan Area, environmental assessment and functional servicing report in the amount of $482,800, excluding HST, as a single source under the Town of Tecumseh purchasing policy and Schedule A of Bylaw 2021-60. And as amended by Bylaw 2021-103. And that council delegate the authority to the Chief Administrative Officer, the Purchasing Coordinator, and the Director of Public Works and Engineering Services to execute an agreement satisfactory in form to the town solicitor with Dillon Consulting Limited. That concludes my presentation. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
All right, thank you, Mr. Barton. Any questions or comments at this stage? Then the recommendation is brought forward, moved by Councillor Houston and supported by Councillor Jobin. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed, if any, motion carries. Thank you very much. Anything else, Mr. Barton? All right, I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Ogier, our clerk, and deal with the bylaws.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just two bylaws for council's consideration this evening. Bylaw 2023-027 Shuttleworth Drain, and that's for two readings this evening. And bylaw 2023-028 Sullivan Creek Drain, also for two readings this evening. And Mr. Mayor, in noting Councillor Jobin's declaration of pecuniary interests earlier this evening, I would ask if council could give separate consideration to each bylaw this evening.
Will do, thank you. And we'll deal with bylaw number one, the Shuttleworth Drain, first and second readings. Motion moved by Councillor Higginson, supported by Councillor Tonio. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. And bylaw number two, the Sullivan Creek Drain, first and second readings. Got a motion on it, Councillor Houston and Councillor Donor. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that motion is carried. Any further, or is there any unfinished business? None this evening. Any new business? No new business. I just want to, okay. Okay, I'll be very quick. I just want to, I see the chief is here and certainly Mr. Bartnick and Mr. Dupuy and crew. I want to certainly extend my thanks during the ice storm, and it's been it was a bit of a messy messy for the community now, but all in all, when I look at the impact in the county and that, we were very fortunate and up and running very quickly and so forth. So to your respective crews, and that just extend my thanks to Public Works and Water and certainly the fire department. They're not here, but Essex Power Corporation as well, where they were pretty busy. So I just want to extend my thanks to all of you, and so extend that to the staff. Councillor Houston.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was through you. I was going to say the exact same thing, and I'll also say thank you to Parks, as I was texting. Yep, Casey and his crew with a lot of the town trees that were down, and he was very responsive. So want to include Parks too.
Sorry, you always miss the ones you love, you know. But yeah, it's true. The whole staff, everyone done terrific work. Any further new business? If not, then well, I need a confirmatory bylaw on the proceedings of this meeting. Councillor Houston, Councillor Higginson, all in favor? Opposed, carried. Any notices of motion? None here this evening. Our next meeting, members of council, will be on March 14th. We have a 4:45 quarter revision. Start with De Monte Drain and the Gouin Drain, followed by a 5:30 in camera meeting. 6:30 a special council meeting, and that's the awards. And 7 o'clock our regular council meeting. No further business. Adjournment's in order. Councillor Higginson and Councillor Dorner. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. And certainly thank you, council administration, for our meeting this evening. And thank you for those who were streaming from the comforts of home. So we bid you all a good night.